extraterrestrial in nature, we've realized that the information that we ought to share with each and every one of you should be of such a nature so that you can adapt it into your terrestrial lives. As such, allow me to indicate that this interaction will have two parts to it. The first part shall deal with some of the ideas of what you call us extraterrestrials, to answer a few questions that many of you have been asking about our different species. The second part shall deal specifically with many of the ideas and desires that each and every one of you have expressed with regard to attaining success in the endeavors in your life, to know that you can create this success in very specific, very clear ways without a lot of struggle, without a lot of strife, with clear consciousness, very, very simply. Therefore, the second portion of this interaction shall have a title, and you may give this title to the entire tape, even though the first portion we will be discussing a little bit about ourselves. The title you may use is 135, the No Risk Formula. Now, allow us to begin, first of all, with the idea of extraterrestrial consciousness. Most of you will understand there's really nothing mysterious about this. There is life throughout the universe, and it takes many different forms of expression. But the one basic common idea is that we are expressions of the all values, the one consciousness of creation, just as you are yourself. Each and every being, no matter what form physiologically it may take, is another mirror, another facet of the idea of the universal consciousness expressing itself in every possible way that it can. We have discussed this concept with many of you many times, and I will not belabor the point at this particular exchange. Suffice it to say, each and every one of you as a unique reflection, as a unique expression of the infinite, also contains the whole infinite. You are holographic, if you will, in nature. The part contains all the information of the whole. Each part contains the whole. You have the ability to express your part and your wholeness in whatever way, shape, or form you deem to be the most exciting expression you could manifest, because that is your purpose, that is your mission, that is your legacy, to live up to your full potential as the particular expression you are being in this lifetime. Many individuals, as we have discussed, say, oh, I am searching for my purpose in life, I am searching for my meaning, why am I here, what am I doing? The idea, as we have stressed before many times, is to follow the thing that excites you the most, acting on it with integrity, because that excitement, that vibration you call excitement, is the answer to your prayers, is the indicator that lets you know that this thing that excites you more than anything else is the path that you are here to perform. Therefore, it is unerring. It is always easy to find, because it is the thing that fills you with the most joy. And if you follow it and act on it with absolute faith and absolute trust, you will unfold the purpose of your chosen lifetime, this particular expression, this particular lifetime. You will not fail in that sense. Now, we will discuss this a little bit in more detail from a new point of view in the second part of this exchange. But first of all, let us talk about extraterrestrials, as you call us. Once again, the idea is that there are many forums. Now, there was on your videotape a question that was posed. Many of your scientists are listening for radio signals from extraterrestrial, yet they have not really heard any. Well, why not? Well, that is very easy to answer. We do not use radio are long past their radio history. No longer do they give off radio wave signals from their planet for you to pick up. The civilizations that are, let's say, relatively close to your civilization that are still using radio have not been using radio long enough for the radio signals to have reached you yet and will not reach you for quite some time. Your civilization is on the verge of not using radio anymore. The idea also is that there are many forms of electromagnetic communication that can be done in what you would call tight band communication. In other words, the form of communication that is laser-like and does not leak into space for other civilizations to pick up. So you are on the verge, as a technological civilization, also of dispensing with radio waves. And therefore you, as a planet, will also be radio silent for the most part. In the very near future, perhaps within what you may term the next decade or two at the most. Therefore, understand that your communication with extraterrestrial societies will more often than not take the form that you see before you now. The idea of direct mind-to-mind communication. For our civilizations have learned that the physical form, what you call the human body, what we perhaps call the exosomy body, what some other civilization will refer to as their own style of body, all have the capability of acting as biological transceivers. And it is a much, much, much more direct form of communication that contains a greater ability of expression than a simple modulation of electromagnetic waves. The idea is that, yes, it does take a little bit of time to train the receiver, to train the sender, but once the training is done, once the sender and the receiver are synchronized in their wavelengths, once they are sensitized to each other, then communication can occur on a multitude of levels. Do understand that the communication you are receiving through the physical channel before you now is taking place on many more levels other than just visually, auditorily. There is energy being sent to you that is going through the channel into you. You are receiving conversation, communication on many different levels of your consciousness. Sometimes this communication on these levels, sub and unconscious as you call them, will be embedded in your consciousness and only blossom later, perhaps when you relax in sleep, in your dream state, or perhaps when your mind is wandering elsewhere, suddenly you will snap and remember a certain portion of the information that we are discussing that you did not hear with your ears nor see with your eyes. There are, aside from the vocalizations that we are able to create through the channel, also the gestures that you will see the channel's body going through. This is indicative of another form of conversation, another level of the conversation going on that you are picking up, as you would say, subliminally. And it is saying sometimes the same thing and sometimes many different things that you yourself will not realize until you release that information on the appropriate level at the appropriate time. But realize again that the emotionality this way can come through. I am not speaking your language. I do not even speak my own language anymore, as our society is now mostly telepathic. I do understand our language as an ancient language, as a remnant language, and a few words of it can be spoken from time to time through the channel because it is the language that I know. But I do not speak your English. I do not speak any other kind of language. What is simply happening is that my mind, my thoughts, my consciousness, my frequency is now synchronized with the thoughts and the mind and the consciousness and the frequency of the channel before you, and you are receiving a translation of my thoughts. The channel is now acting much in the same way as your radio, as your telephone. You understand, as has been discussed, as has been described, that the voice you hear on your telephone is not actually, not literally, not directly the voice of the person speaking on the other end. It has been converted into electromagnetic waves and channel, we have synchronized, and therefore the channel is functioning as a model, as a translation device for my consciousness. But it is made out of the channel's energy. I am not actually directly there with you physically, as you understand that terminology. I am conducting a long-distance call through the channel's line. Do not worry, I will not send you the bill. Many individuals have discussed the idea of what you call UFOs. Of course, to us they are IFOs, because we know perfectly well that we are in them and what they are. So we are us. However, let us simply use the generic terminology of spacecraft, if you wish, saucer, if you wish, or they are disc-shaped. Most of them are anyway. There are a few exceptions, but we will not go into that for now. The idea of spacecraft is simply that it is a resonating chamber, a resonating cavity, so to speak. It is a waveguide. For those of you that understand that terminology in your physical terms, in your physics terms. The idea is that we do not travel per se in the same way you understand space travel. We do not have a form of propulsion per se in the same way that you propel your rockets through space. We have created a vibrational resonance chamber. Everything in the universe is the product of vibration. You are the product of a certain frequency of the primal energy. We are the product of a certain frequency of primal energy, of creative energy. Everything has a signature vibration, if you will, by which it is identifiable. The idea even of space-time, of location itself, can be identified with a frequency. In other words, if you have an object, and it is in location A, it has a certain frequency vibration. If you take that object and move it to location B, it will have almost an identical signature vibration, but almost is the key, for it will vary in one small way. It will have a slightly different locational vibration. Thereby you can identify the idea that this is now a different thing, a completely different object, and that the concept of location is not a place in which the object exists, but it is actually an integral property of the object itself. Different object in B, different object in A. We have, in our technology, as you would call it, created the ability to isolate our spacecraft from any particular universal vibration. While the spacecraft is isolated in that way, while it is at the zero rest point, the center point of all possible universes, all possible locations in space and time, we then infuse that craft with the vibrational signature of the location we wish to go to. Therefore, the craft then, when its energy is overwhelmed by the greater energy of the vibrational harmonic of that location, will immediately, instantaneously, as you say, disappear from location A and simply reconstruct itself at location B. No traveling has occurred. It has, in that sense, slipped through the holographic matrix, redefining itself, re-identifying itself and its crew, hopefully, at the other end. There have been accidents, as you say. Crew members have not always shown up at the other end. You will encounter this when you finally discover this particular technique. So I would simply say, not to worry you, but simply be cautious, be careful, be thorough. Otherwise, you may find yourself in parts unknown. Understand that this does not in any way, shape, or form violate the idea of traveling faster than light, which in a sense is a barrier for, or I shall say a definition for, the boundary of physical third-dimensional reality. We do not break the barrier of light. We simply avoid the issue altogether. By transforming ourselves into a higher dimension little bit of a formula. This will describe the idea that you would call the hull material of a very basic spacecraft. There have been many refinements in many civilizations that have, shall we say, improved upon this formula, but this is a good place for you to start since you are at the beginning of this type of technology. First of all, of course, experiment and explore the whole idea of vibrational tonality, and that will give you your navigational system. But in terms of actually generating an experimental substance that you can play with for a while and see what kind of properties you can coax from it, I give you this particular combination of elements, as you call them. Magnesium, 62.2%. Nickel, 12%. Copper, 9%. Aluminum, 8.5%. Silicon, 4.5%. The remainder is made up of what you would call argon at 3.8%. The idea is to form within an argon atmosphere a melted matrix of silicon into which you then infuse the powdered form of all the other elements I mentioned in their proper ratio, creating not an alloy, but a matrix embedded in the silicon substance, allowed to cool. The correct amount of argon will inject itself simply by being present in the atmosphere in which you have melted, shall we say, or liquefied the silicon. Have fun with that. And great joy in your discoveries.